give it another minute or two, let folks get in the room before we get started. Good afternoon to those just joining us. Thanks for coming in. We're giving folks a few minutes to join the Zoom. Looks like everyone is already muted, but if by chance you're not on mute, if you could go ahead and do that, we would really appreciate it. All right. I think we'll probably have more people joining as we go along, but I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Kelsey Mesher. I'm the Deputy Director at Transportation Choices Coalition. It's awesome to and to see the interest in today's transit talk on youth mobility. If you're not familiar with our organization, Transportation Choices is a policy and advocacy organization in Washington working to bring people more and better transportation options that are healthy, sustainable, and accessible. We wanted to start today by taking a moment to acknowledge that while we are gathering virtually, our panel is joining us from unceded lands in the Pacific Northwest. We are calling in today from the tribal lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish, Lummi, Nooksack, and Stillaguamish tribes, as well as the land of the Yakima people. We are dropping a resource in the chat, and we invite you to learn about the land you are on. We welcome you to acknowledge that in the chat as well. November is Native Heritage Month, and we'd like to take that opportunity to lift up the work and contributions of colleagues at Washington's Tribal Transportation Planning Organization. This organization brings together state tribes and partners to foster communication and cooperation. It also serves as a forum for the advancement of tribal transportation professionals and agencies serving the best interest of tribes at all levels of government. Transportation Choices has been lucky to connect with this organization. We've attended their annual conference and their meetings, and we are grateful for all the work they are doing to advance safety and mobility issues for tribal communities in our state. Okay, I have a few housekeeping items because we are trying out a new transit talk format today. Today, we have the option for you to attend either of two amazing panels on youth mobility. One features young transit riders and a parent, and the other panel features transit agency staff who are implementing the new Youth Ride Free program. And so in a few minutes, you will choose which panel you'd like to attend, and then at the end, we'll come back together for a quick debrief. We do have enabled captions for the talk, but as we've learned with this new format, you cannot use captions in a breakout room. So if you do want the ability to have captions turned on, I invite you to stay in this main room, which will be the transit rider panel, so you can use the captions. We are working to make our events as accessible as possible and definitely learning along the way. If you would like to show or hide the subtitles in the main room, you can do so using the options at the bottom of the Zoom screen under live transcript. Please stay muted throughout the webinar, and please feel free to use the chat to ask questions and expand on discussion topics. Of course, please be respectful to the panelists and to each other. You can send questions for panelists in the chat privately to Susan Gleason or Raven Cruz, or Transportation Choices staff. Both breakout sessions will be recorded, and we will share them with you once they are available so you don't miss anything. And now I'd like to introduce our awesome two panels of speakers. You'll have a chance to introduce yourselves more in the breakout rooms, but for now, I will introduce you by name. So in our breakout room 1, our agency panel, we will hear from Danny Harula, the Youth Program Manager at King County Metro. Dan, if everyone could give a wave, that would be awesome. And Maureen McCarthy, the Director of Community and Government Relations at Whatcom Transportation Authority. And then on our second panel in this main Zoom room, we will hear from Jasmine Smith, the political manager at the Washington Bus, Maham Khan, a high school student and transit advocate from Yakima, and Carla Salter, a parent, transit rider, and writer also known as the Bus Chick. We will now head into our breakout sessions to hear from our speakers. You should see a prompt to join a breakout room. Again, if you would like to hear from the agency panel, please join that breakout room. And if you would like to hear from the transit riders, just stay right here in the main room. If you are on mobile, there should be an icon in the upper left corner that says breakout. Give everyone a minute.
Can you remind us when we'll be coming back to the main room?
That's a great question. Let's say 12:45. All right, we'll see some of you then.
Well, nothing pop up in my screen.
All right. We are working on it. Let's
Okay.
give our staff. We've got 3 staff in the background working on this, so I'm sure the breakout room invite will come soon. Thank you for your patience.
It's gonna, for the people that are not on mobile, should it be in the bottom?
It will pop up on the bottom, and I think it has not popped up yet. That's what I'm picking up. Is anyone seeing any invitation for a breakout room yet? Not yet. McKenna, maybe could you try one more time? Thank you again for your patience. All right, we are experiencing some technical difficulties. Hester, Hester, our moderator, is in the other breakout room by herself. We did test this several times, so this is truly a live technical challenge we're experiencing.
Should we try to leave and then come back in?
It sounds like if you would like to join the other breakout room, please direct message McKenna Lux, and she will assign you to that breakout room. Again, direct message McKenna Lux, or just put your name in the chat if you would like to go into the breakout room with the agency panel. Looks like people are slowly making their way over there. Perfect, Al. Thanks so much. Thanks, Kaylin. Nice to see you. All right. We appreciate everyone rolling with this. We've been on Zoom for years, but we're still figuring it out. Thanks, folks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our youth panel in this room as we get people sorted. I'm going to give everyone the chance to introduce themselves one more time. If you could, if you are a speaker today, please share your name, your pronouns, and why did you decide to join today's conversation? And let's go ahead with Jasmine, Maham, and then Carla.
Hi, my name's Jasmine. I use she, her pronouns, and I got invited kind of through my work at the bus because I work with and am a young person, passionate about transit and whatnot, but just in general, in my own personal capacity, love talking about buses, trains, biking, and how we get around, and making sure that we have inclusive policy around that. I just love buses and transit. Can I pass it to Maham?
Yes, that'd be great. Maham.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maham Khan, and I joined this transit talk today because I really care about, giving this resource to everybody and making sure that everyone has access, because this is a great resource and not everybody has access. And I want to make sure that everyone knows what's going on and is able to take advantage.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Maham. And can you say a little bit more about, I know you're calling in from Yakima. How did you get involved with transit advocacy work?
So in February, I testified to the state legislature about helping to pass the Move Ahead Washington package. And so that is why, and I've been in contact with McKenna. And so that's how I got invited to be on here.
Thank you so much. We're so happy you're here. And Carla, can you round us out?
Sure. I'm Carla Salter, and I use she, her pronouns. Why am I excited to talk about this topic? I'm just like Jasmine. I'm extremely passionate about buses and transit, and specifically about access, making transit more accessible and making it more people be able to choose transit instead of just sort of encouraging and shaming people, but make it accessible. So I rode transit as a youth, as starting, at a very young age, and now I have kids who ride transit. So this topic is really close to my heart.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So our first question is, could you each describe a bit about where you travel to most? What do transportation options look like for some of your most frequented destinations? And for Carla, could you share about the role transit has played in your parenting journey? And why don't we go in the same order, Jasmine, Maham, Carla?
Yeah. So where I travel to the most has changed, especially with the pandemic. But I suppose I do a lot of my travel just like for recreation purposes, like getting to walk around town, going out for a little trip to I just went up to Vancouver, and so took my bike on the train and got to use the buses and bike lanes and all that there. But I would say that before, I was often traveling to like different events and whatnot back in like the pre-times, where I would be going to work and then afterwards going to like some little fun actually like urbanist meetup or different things, going to hang out with my friends, and it takes 5 buses throughout the day getting to where I am going and who I'm seeing. I think also part of the question was before I turned 19, when I grew up, I was in a suburban area. And so I didn't often take public transit in like my day-to-day life. But when I was going and visiting my friends down in West Seattle over the weekend and whatnot, I would take the 512 down and then navigate the buses within Seattle to get there. But it wasn't until I went to Western that I actually like started using public transportation regularly. Bus passes from WTA represent changing the lives. Yeah, I'll pass it on.
Okay, so mostly as a student, I travel to stores, and, just shopping centers. And so what I see with transit is I see that, there's transit stops close to some stores, but not all, especially grocery stores, which are, essential for pretty much everyone. Because, we need groceries, and especially for people who live far away from grocery stores. I know that can be really hard when if you rely on public transit, and if there's not a stop that goes to the grocery stores, that can be really difficult. Thank you.
So for me, the question was, how does transit play a role in my parenting journey? Well, I first want to say that it played a really big role in my own young life and my own sort of conviction that public transit is important for young people. I started riding on my own in early elementary school. It gave me freedom. It gave me access. I go to school, go to my grandma's house, those kinds of things. But as a parent, I would say, it's played an integral role in my parenting journey because our family doesn't have a car. I mean, my children came home on the bus with me at 1 day old. They've been riding transit ever since. My oldest child is 15 and my younger child will be 13 very soon. They're at the stage now where they can ride on their own. So they've been, riding with me and now riding without me. I think one thing though, since we're talking about the new fare, no fare for young people, I think, yes, it's very important for access for teens, so that they can get to jobs and stores and have that kind of access and freedom. But it's also really an important calculation for families. So once my kids reached paying age, once they turn 6, right, the cost calculation of traveling changes dramatically. So all of a sudden you're talking about paying for 4 people to ride. And if you're outside the transfer window, it becomes very expensive to take a trip. And if people have an alternative, even taking like a Lyft or something would be cheaper than that. So, or it used to be, back in the day, but so just, it really matters for families and for young people who are at a point where they can be independent.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to read our next question, which is, we want to know, in your experience, what makes a transit system welcoming, useful, or enjoyable? Or, for your kids, what makes a transit system welcoming, useful, or enjoyable? And what makes it hard or unwelcoming? And let's go in a reverse order: Carla, Maham, and Jasmine.
I was just typing in the chat because I couldn't wait. So many thoughts about this. So we can talk about the sort of physical infrastructure first. I'll start there. So stops need to be safe and accessible. So little things that you don't think about when like traveling with well, maybe people do think about it, but it's very rare when traveling with young children. Like the stop needs to be set back from the street. So you don't want to be standing like right on the edge of the curb. We need crosswalks and, safe sidewalks and things like that to even get to the bus stops. We need shelters so we can sit down. I mean, I know this is a perennial issue that never gets solved, but restrooms, restrooms near transit stops and at transit centers. So the physical infrastructure of the stop. And then of course, there are the vehicles. So when my kids were very small, when they were stroller age, I vowed to never take a stroller on the bus when my first child was born, because the policy was you have to take your child out of the stroller, you have to fold the stroller, and then a lot of the vehicles had stairs. So just trying to get your kid and the stroller and your stuff. And if there's more than one child, it was just nightmarish. I mean, once I had 2 kids and it was too hard to just strap one kid on, the distance I would walk to not have to get on the bus it was really hard during that time. If you had groceries and then vehicles now, like low floor vehicles, there's a new stroller policy, thank God. So people can take their strollers on the bus and use the wheelchair area if it's available. But having the wide, not the narrow, aisles, but the wide spaces and maneuverability is really important. And then I would say from a sort of more transit planning perspective, obviously frequency, right? You want to be able to show up at a stop and not look at a schedule and be managing little people for 15, 20 more minutes when you're standing right near a busy street. So those kinds of things really matter and make a difference when you're traveling with little ones, with older children, right? The safety and accessibility all matters just as much because they're going to be by themselves.
Thank you. Maham, how about for you and for your friends, what makes transit inviting, welcoming, comfortable, and what makes it hard or challenging for you to ride?
Yeah, so when my family goes to the Central Washington Fair, I've noticed that a lot of people, including myself, use public transport to get there. And so transit systems such as that one make it easy for people to get to places such as the fairgrounds where it's really hard to find parking, in the crowded areas close to the fair. And so what makes it also useful is that it saves on time and gas, which are 2 really important things, right? And as Ms. Salter pointed out, it's also helpful that public transit is stroller and wheelchair accessible because, it's so hard sometimes even when you're going in your own car for someone with a wheelchair, to help them get in the car and out and with strollers. So I really like how it's super accessible. But what makes the transit system hard is that the transit doesn't go to every street or public destination. There aren't enough buses and they often have tight schedules. Due to these reasons, not everyone has access to public transit and is unable to take advantage of these resources. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So all those things are so true. I see a lot of nodding heads. Jasmine, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily what hasn't already been covered, but definitely redundancy has been something that is really helpful when there's all these different types of like disruptions and whatnot and services, and having that frequency available no matter like what's going on. One thing that I was thinking about recently was that my family lives up in Linwood, and so I was a frequenter of the 512 and everything. And I used to be able to just like pick it up downtown and take it up. And yeah, it took longer than doing the light rail and all that. But when I was looking at what used to be my commute back when I actually was living in Wallingford and working in Linwood, then the number of extra seats and the additional time that it took because we just eliminated a direct from Seattle to Linwood route so that we could just cut it and rely on trains. And then when the trains are squish loaded and everything, then it can really throw like regular transit users as opposed to like event transit users like out of whack. And that's something that you kind of have to like plan for. And like I use transit to get to baseball games and everything. But I also know that like if I'm going around the baseball game, then I need to like take a bus or bike down instead, because it's just not going to be as enjoyable or convenient when it's crush loaded, and we don't have enough support to make it as fun or welcoming. And like to that extent, when it comes to making it welcoming and useful and enjoyable, having all of those opportunities to go all around town and not have to think about how hard it is to get east, west into different destinations that are like regular destinations for folks, whether it's for festivals or events, or just like going to the library and grocery shopping or the parks that we have. So yeah.
Kelsey, could I just add something really quick?
Yeah, please.
One thing, Jack's comment in the chat reminded me that I don't know if I compliment on how much more accessible everything is now, like the vehicles, the low floor vehicles and the new stroller policy have made, I mean, it didn't make a difference for me, but I think it makes a big difference for users now, not just parents, but people who have grocery carts or other needs. So I wanted to just say that. And then also the destination issue is really big for youth. I think, high schools tend to have bus stops near them, but not all schools do. And sometimes parents are taking their children to school on a bus because if you're within a certain, if you're not inside their if you're inside their walk shed, even if it's not really walkable, you don't get a school bus. So just having stops near destinations where children would be going.
And to add on to that, I used to work at an elementary school before this, and my first year there, we were in a temporary building. So while the school was being renovated, then everyone that was attending Loyal Heights was commuting out to Green Lake area, the John Marshall building. And I know there was one of our students, like the student that I worked with a lot, that her family took the 45 over, but the access, and that needs to be a planned issue when having folks or having schools renovated and relocating students essentially, and relocating entire commutes for a year or more.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hearing themes about kind of change or even schedule changes or route restructures that can really impact, especially somebody who's learning to use the transit system, getting familiar with it, even learning how to navigate your city or your town, that's a huge part of that too. Thanks so much, everyone. Let's see. So yeah, we were talking about, in transportation, the decisions and the plans that are made are sometimes on a 20, 30, 40-year timeline. And so they really are about your future, the future of young people. And so I'm wondering, what do you wish policymakers understood better about youth mobility, and how do youth want to be engaged in transit decisions and policymaking? And why don't we start with Maham first?
Okay, so I wish that policymakers would understand that in future years, our population will grow so much, and there will be so much more traffic and congestion. So more traffic basically, means more pollution, and all that carbon dioxide that's going to be released from cars will go into the air and make it unsafe. Clean air is such a blessing, but honestly, I don't think we'll realize its value until 20, 30, or 40 years, when our youth may have to face unclean air, which could lead to so many more problems, like health problems. And I feel like youth would want to be engaged in transit decisions and policymaking when it's, brought down to their level. If this was brought into schools and kids were able to talk about what they see at a level, where they are, that would be so much better, because there aren't very many opportunities for kids like high school students like me to be an advocate for what they believe. And if this was an issue that was discussed in schools and other places where youth go, it would help youth to be more involved in transit decisions and policymaking, because it's more accessible for them to stand up for what they believe and raise their voices. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the idea of listening in schools. Go to the youth. Jasmine, this is your bread and butter, getting young people involved in political work. What do you think?
Definitely agree. both mobilizing young folks to be involved in the decisions in Olympia, but then also in that interim period, making sure that Olympia comes to the young folks and treat youth as the asset and the like guiding force and guiding light to design how we want our future to be, because the people who have had their say and continue to have their say throughout the years are not the ones that are going to be impacted by the decisions that are made today, that by the budgets that are set today. It's the young folks and the folks that'll come after them that we're impacting and that we need to listen to and design our systems, design our world for. When it comes to, I guess, what Hom was saying about the environment and how we're setting things up, I think we have a really dire situation right now where we need to start addressing the health impacts of environmental injustice that have happened. And when we look at policies like missing middle housing and just housing policy in general, upzoning, and thinking about how many of the folks that are living in dense areas are subjected to car fumes on major thoroughfares all day, or just in general, and how there's that difference between how we design our cities for people and how we design little like neighborhood enclaves to have like tree canopies, which are great and that we need, but they're not equitably distributed throughout the city. And making sure that we are designing for everyone to be able to live safe, healthy, thriving lives as we attack this climate. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. What do you think? What's your policy?
Okay, well, I
makers
mean,
know?
I'm 50, so I'm not a young person. I'm not like thinking about my own future here, but in these timelines, but thinking about this for my kids, I mean, most of it's already been said. The things I want for my kids, I want breathable air. I mean, we got a real taste of what it's like to not have that and how scary that is and how vulnerable it makes people who don't even have access to buildings. But so I want breathable air. I want a functioning ecosystem. I want a planet that works for them so they can drink and eat and breathe. I also want housing that's accessible and affordable, right? And I want interdependent, well-functioning communities. And I feel like all of those things, transit is a key piece of all of those things being true in the future, and that we need to continue to invest in it and make it sort of a centerpiece of our transportation systems if we want those things.
Thank you so much. This has been an awesome discussion. We have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, so I want to get into the audience questions. First is, what could transit agencies provide to empower young people to ride? How can we better reach young people? What motivates young people to choose transit over other options? I think there are some agency folks wondering, how do we get in touch with young people and get them to ride our services? Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Can I go?
Yeah.
Okay, so as a youth person myself, I think one way to reach youth is to go where, youth gather most, which is one place is schools. And so if you go and, there's especially places like assemblies or in, they're like homeroom classes. Those are some great places to go and talk to youth about transit issues, what's going on, how they can help. And I think one way to motivate youth is to kind of tell them about how this is going to affect their future. Because honestly, a lot of people, may not realize something like how important a situation is until they realize what the benefits are and what this is going to affect, how this is going to affect them. And also creating programs that get youth involved, such as, even like clubs in schools and places around town where youth can come and help help this movement and become an advocate. And to motivate youth, I would say to make buses, a place where it's kind of like a community where kids can feel safe and they can come and they can be like, yeah, it's a good place to go, and they feel comfortable on the buses, and they enjoy it, maybe. Because one important thing that I would see is a lot of youth, as they're starting to learn how to drive, they may be excited about driving, and they're like, oh, why should I take the bus when it's like, when my car is right here outside in my driveway? And so we want to tell them, what the benefits are of riding the bus, especially in the future, how this is going to help us with things like climate change, how it's going to help us battle those big issues out there. And then, explain to them why it's better in the long term to, wait those 5-10 minutes for the bus to get here instead of going in your car right now, and how that's going to help in the long term. So just getting them excited and informing them about what's going on would really help. Thank you.
One of the things actually that Maham said that is also kind of, the bus has an edge on cars. I mean, first of all, not all young people have access to cars or can afford gas. But on top of that, I think that what the bus has to recommend it is that it provides independence at a much younger age. I mean, in theory, I started taking the bus alone at 8. I mean, that's not common maybe, but certainly 12, 13, 14, 15 kids can get around the city on the bus or the county, and they're not old enough to drive. And most children at 16 probably don't have regular access to a car anyway. So I think maybe that side of it, the independence, the ability to go places with your friends is a big deal. And that can be, beyond, in Seattle, obviously kids, a lot of them take Metro to high school, but once they get that, for when ORCA was a requirement, once they get that ORCA card, they can use it for those other things, meeting up with friends and not having to try to depend on an adult to get you where you need to go.
Yeah, to add on, I think it's twofold of not only advertising those benefits that are available, but also making sure that it's designed in a way that is accessible and an easier option and a more frequent option. So that, there might be 5 or 10 minutes waiting in between buses, like headways and whatnot, but that it is in the long run faster and easier to just take the bus to where you're going versus driving and finding parking and whatnot, designing our system so that there's that obvious benefit. That's oh, of course I would take the bus, and then communicate you have that added independence, that frequency, that ease. You can just hang out with your friends on the bus as you go wherever you're going, and do whatever you need to do and not have to worry about different things and different safety issues that happen when you have young people driving for the first time and or for their first years and everything, and learning how to operate a motor vehicle at such a young age, at 16, it's a lot. And that's, something that I don't know. I'll pass it on.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hearing a lot about this sort of community component, the social component of being able to take the bus with your friends. Great stuff, everyone. The next question is coming in from a parent. This person says, I just moved to Washington from a place that did not have good public transit. My 12-year-old daughter has been excited to ride the bus and meet up with friends. She says some of her friends are allowed to ride to school, but many are not yet allowed to ride other places alone. How are you, as a parent, feeling about I think directing this to Carla, how are you feeling about your level of comfort riding, having kids ride on their own to destinations of their choice? And what more could be done to help other young people or their parents feel confident about the safety of this travel option? Why don't we start with Carla as the parent on the panel?
I don't know. This is harder than I expected it to be, letting my kids ride without me. I'm an anxious person, so I just worry about every little thing that my kids do. So that's that's part of it. And, it's a little bit hypocritical. I was roaming around the city by myself in elementary school, and I just about died when my youngest child took the bus alone for the first time at 11, almost 12, like a mile and a half. So it was really hard. I think for me, it's not that I don't trust my child. They are extremely, my kids know everything about the bus because they've been riding their whole lives. It's more that the world is scary, and it's not just, scary people on transit. It's cars, they have to cross the street alone. There's intersections that are not safe. There's just all these factors. And then my youngest child is non-binary. So I worry about bigotry. I worry about attacks. I worry about stuff that it's not the bus. It's human beings that they will encounter without me being there. So it does feel scary. I think a few things I think about is that the buses are actually very safe. Other people being around. I give my kids a lot of safety strategies without scaring them. I talk about, where you want to sit. You want to sit near the driver. On the route where you're going, who do you know, or what places could you go if you felt unsafe or if you needed something, right? The people in that store, so-and-so lives there or whatever. So just thinking ahead to, if you feel unsafe, what are some things you could do, right? So we do things like that. Obviously the majority of the time, everything's going to be fine. I do a lot of talking about when you cross the street, you got to make sure that that people are turning this way and people are turning that way. And then I also remind myself that my kids are always, 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 always much safer on the bus than they are in a car. Always, especially when they turn 16 and they're driving themselves or riding with very inexperienced drivers. We live right behind Garfield High School. And let me tell you about inexperienced drivers. These people do not know what they're doing. They can't park. They don't know how to turn without, it's terrifying. So, I don't know if I got kind of off track. I will say that I also just remind myself that every time they do it, they build confidence and they build strategies. And that eventually, right, they have to be in the world without me. So my job as their parent is to give them, over time, more and more independence so that they can eventually become competent people in the world. And these days, kids, teenagers have cell phones, which I never did. If I needed to reach my parents, I needed to call them, collect on a payphone. So they have more tools. And they know when the bus is coming, which I never did.
Awesome. Maham, what do you think about, how do we build confidence in people to feel good? Are there destinations that, people can start with? Maybe you start with school and then you go to the grocery store. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, that's what I would do. I feel like stores would be not stores. Schools would be a good spot to start because it's close enough destination and you know where your kid's going. And maybe building relationships with drivers and having kind of knowing some other people who ride public transit, so your kid is safe with other people who are maybe regulars on the bus. So there's someone to kind of keep an eye on your child, and even for your child themselves to know there's someone here that I know that I can that I'm familiar with, so if in case anything happens, I can go to them and they can help me, and just making sure you guys are comfortable with the driver, so that you feel safe while they're driving, and that that if there's as Ms. Salter said, sitting near the bus and having those sitting near the driver, having those techniques and tips just to keep yourself safe are really good ways to build confidence.
Yeah, I do think for the parent too, I think groups are huge. Like when my daughter wants to go see a friend, you know, and she takes the bus. Actually, I have to kind of push her a little bit, my older child. She'll take the bus. I feel a little bit more concerned than I do if she and a friend want to go somewhere together, right? That instead of her going to and from alone, I think, yeah, starting with your child going with someone else, just anyone else, even someone their age, will make you as a parent feel more safe, I think. Just because there's another person in case something happens.
Jasmine, anything you want to add? I think we can maybe have time for one more question.
I don't have anything to add. Let it pass for one more.
Sounds good. This question is about getting to transit. What role do you think, you know, we say first, last mile connections, but like walking or biking between the bus stop and the final destination, like how important is that when it comes to youth taking the bus, you know, and feeling comfortable doing so?
Oh, I think it's super important when it comes to what streets you have to cross. And like, let's say you make a mistake and go one stop too far. Then what do you need to do to get back to where you're going? Do you need to cross half a highway to get over to the other side in the opposite direction? How are the streets that you're going to be walking on to get to your bus just a road with fast moving cars and then a grassy ditch? Do you have the sidewalk infrastructure where you're going? All of those like last mile things have a huge impact in whether someone decides to even take a public transit for that route. Or for that destination that they're going, or if they have to find some other situation.
Carla or Maham, anything to add on getting to and from the bus stop and what role that plays? I know Carla, you've already talked about that fear of cars and crossing the street.
Yeah, I think it's huge for parents feeling safe about it. I mean, yeah. Absolutely.
Especially if bus stops are a little farther away from like, you know, your house or the schools, in places where, you know, there aren't a lot of other people around, or, you know, like, for example, there are streets in Yakima where it's just orchards, and there's no real like house or school or, you know, like a destination close by where if you know, in case, especially for like young kids, if there's, you know, in case anything happens, for you to run and hide, protect yourself in. So that's definitely kind of a little dangerous when, you know, it's just kind of like in the middle of, you know, nowhere. So it's that's a little bit of a danger that could happen with bus stops, you know, not being as many, there's not like as many, and so they're not as easily accessible.
All right. Well, I think that concludes our breakout room panel. We're going to come back together now with the others and do a little bit of a debrief session. But I just want to say thank you again so much, Maham, Jasmine, and Carla, for this conversation. I think this like on the ground perspective from riders and rider parents is something we don't hear of enough. And so it's been really awesome to hear directly from you, especially as agencies across our whole state, including Amtrak, including ferries, are going to be welcoming kids and young people onto their services for free, hopefully in greater and greater numbers for many years to come. I think we're being joined now. I think we're actually all back. So I'm going to pass it off to Hester to close us out.
Thanks, Kelsey. Welcome back together, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the conversations. As a reminder, I believe at least one of our sessions will be filmed, and we'll be able to share as much content as possible, so you can listen in and revisit the great takeaways. But before we close out, I'd love to ask one speaker from each room to share or re-emphasize a key takeaway from your conversation, maybe to share with the other group that didn't get to participate. So what's one thing you want our audience to remember or keep thinking about after this event? And so I think from my panel, I'm gonna pick on Danny and then maybe Jasmine from this room, if you don't mind sharing as well after Danny. So Danny, take it away.
Well, one thing, it's really hard to narrow it down to one thing, but I think something, I was on a panel with Maureen from WTI up in Bellingham, and I think something I heard in our responses, like one of us coming from like a smaller transit agency and one of us from a much larger transit agency, is that we have so much to learn from each other. And I think hearing about Maureen's programs, it's like, the things that you all are able to experiment with, or like the depth of which you're able to like reach members of your community. It feels like you're in some ways like 2 steps ahead of where we are. And so we have so much to learn from you all, like, okay, now we have done all this classroom education and what's next? What's the next hurdle? But at the same time, a lot of the things that we're experiencing are the same, like some operator youth interactions and needing more operator training, and safety issues and concerns from parents. And I think, I think the thing that we both arrived at, like, that is the most important is just this practice, and that, like, something that's unknown can be, intimidating for anybody to, take that big leap and try it. And so the more that we can do to actually facilitate, safe, positive practice experiences for young people to practice riding transit, is gonna get more people excited about riding and using our systems.
Awesome. Thank you, Danny. Jasmine, for those of us that weren't able to attend your panel, what takeaway would you share?
I think the biggest takeaways that we discussed were that it is an incredible opportunity for both agencies and policymakers alike to come to youth and talk to young people about how to design systems, how to improve the direction that we're going, and make it even more accessible and welcoming to utilize transit. And that a big part of that comes from the infrastructure around us and how we think about last mile, first mile, how we think about density and upzoning and transit access, and how we think about making systems really easy, no matter like what's going on in the world, whether it's events or service disruptions or whatnot, that people can still get where they need to go. And there's systems set up in place so that it's really easy and not discouraging for folks to like love using transit and not it feel like, oh no, something happened and now my whole trip's ruined or anything like that. But yeah, there's a big opportunity when it comes to how we take this chance of making making transit free for young people and making sure that it is the transit that young people want to use.
Beautifully put. Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists here today. Our team at TCC is really excited to continue exploring this topic and learning more about how we can further support young riders. Just so you all know, we will be launching a series of focus groups for Washingtonians 8 and under to gain a better understanding of their transportation needs, habits, and perspectives. We're already learning a lot from engaging with the folks that have been on this panel and other youth programming. Did I say 18 and under? I think I did. Sorry.
I heard 8.
Oh, 18.
I heard 8 too.
Plus 10. If you are in that age range or work with folks in that age range or know someone who might be interested, please take a look at the link in the chat, which Susan just posted. We'll also include that in our email with the recordings. If you would like to stay connected with TCC and learn more about our upcoming events and policy work, please also sign up for our newsletter through the link in the chat that will be forthcoming as well. But thank you all so much for joining us. This was really fun and exciting and informative. So Have a great rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend, and please stay in touch.
Thanks, TCC.
Thank you.